Hi guys, welcome back. In the last session, we understood introduction to JSON Web Tokens. So JSON Web Token is the open standard token that is used to secure our applications. So what is the structure of the JSON Web Token? JSON Web Token is the combination of three parts separated by dots. The first part is called as a header part, and the second part is called as payload part, and third part is called as signature part. So here typically that JSON Web Token is going to look like this. So part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 is called header, part 2 is called payload, part 3 is called signature. So header part, this contains type of the token, which is JWT, and the signing algorithm being used such as HMAC algorithm or SHA algorithm or RSA algorithm. So which algorithm we are going to use and what is the type of the token. So the token type will be JWT. What algorithm that we are going to use, we are going to specify. That will be available as part of the header. Then this JSON is base64 URL encoded to form the first part of the JWT. So as we have seen in the last session, a JSON token will be available like this. So here part 1 is available. After that one dot is available. Then part 2 is available. After that one dot is available. Then part 3 is available. Part 1, part 2 and part 3. Part 1 is called header part, which contains type of the token and algorithm. So algorithm HS256 or SHA256 or RSA algorithm. Type of the token is JWT. So this part will be encoded by using base64. So it is going to look like this. Then coming to payload. In the second part of the token is called payload, which contains the claims. Claims are statements about an entity, typically the user and additional data. So there are three types of claims: registered claims, public claims, and private claims will be available. Now, so who is issuing the token? What is the expiration time of the token? What is the subject of the token? For which user we have given that token? All that information will be available as part of this payload. The second part of the token is the payload, which contains the claims. Claims are the statements about an entity, that nothing but a user and additional data. So three types of claims will be available. One is registered, another one is public, and third one is private claims will be available. What is the meaning of registered claims? So these are set of predefined claims which are not mandatory but recommended to provide set of useful interoperable claims. Issuer, who is providing the token? What is the expiration time for that token? And what is the subject and audience of the token? Like that we can configure the registered claims as part of the payload. And what is a public claim? Public claim nothing but this can be defined at below by using JWTs. To avoid collisions, they should be defined in the JSON Web Token registry or defined as a URI. Resistant namespaces will be available for the public claims. Then private claims will be available. Private claims nothing but whatever the data that both parties agree. That means the client application, provider application, those will be added as part of private claim. So like this is subject, name, and admin. This kind of information will be available in the payload. So that payload will be again encoded by using base64. That is going to look like this. And the last one is called signature. What is signature? So to create the signature part, you have to take the encoded header, encoded payload, a secret. The algorithm is specified in the header and sign that. So whatever the header is available and whatever the payload is available, we are going to encode and we will add some secret for that and we are going to encode that. That is called as our signature. So if you decode the JWT token, we can see the three parts. So here they clearly mention what is the header in the token, what is payload in the token, and what is signature in the token. If you put all these three things together, then the token is going to look like this: part 1, part 2, and part 3. Got it? If you keep the token here, then it is going to decode the token and it is going to tell you what information is available in the token. How the JSON token is going to work? Client application should send JSON token with a bearer, authorization with a bearer space token. So the token will go to the server. Server will verify the token is valid or not. If token is valid, then that request will be processed. So if you see here in the diagram, application, that means client, will send the first request to authorization server with the credentials. It will verify the credentials. It will send the token to the client. Client will send the token to the API. Then API will validate the token and will process your request if the token is valid. So like this, they have given some information about the token. Now, I want to implement that token in the Spring Boot application. Yesterday, we have seen the demo, how the token is going to work. Now, so what we are going to do here, guys, here we are going to create one Spring Boot application. In this Spring Boot application, two endpoints will be available. So first endpoint is /authenticate endpoint. First endpoint is /authenticate endpoint. So this /authenticate endpoint is going to talk to one component called user details service. It will talk to one component called user details service to verify the user. What this user details service will do? User details service is going to talk to the user information where the user information got configured. For example, you can take as a DB or you can take as in-memory credentials. Now, this client application will be available here. Client application will be available here. This client application will send a request. This client will be sending a request to this authenticate URL with the credentials. So client will send a request to this authenticate URL with the credentials. Then this authenticate method is going to talk to authentication server. That means authentication manager will be available. So here let me configure authentication manager. Authentication manager will be available. So what is the duty of this authentication manager? This authentication manager is responsible to verify. So this responsible to authenticate user request. Okay. So authentication manager will be configured and the user detail service will be configured and the user data also will be configured. You can take the database data or you can configure in-memory credentials also. Now, this authentication manager will communicate with the user details service to fetch the user data based on the username. This user details service will fetch the user data from the database or in-memory credentials, whatever it is. This authenticate method is going to talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager will talk to user detail service to get the user data from the DB. Okay, so this user detail service will contain the user data. It is used to fetch the user data. Authentication manager will validate the user credential. If user credentials are valid, this authenticate endpoint will give the token to the user. So user will send a request and user will get token as a response. User will send a request with the credentials and application will send token as a response. Okay, guys. Now here there is another method is available, which is /hello method is available. This is my actual business method. So if you want to access this method, you need a token. If you want to access this method, you need a token. Now this, observe the flow. Our application is available. This is my REST API. Our application is available. This is my REST API. In this REST API, I'm having authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager will talk to user detail service. User detail service will talk to database to get the user data. If user data is valid, then this authenticate method will talk to one component in our application that is called JWT utils component. It will talk to one component called JWT utils component. So when it is going to talk to JWT utils, if authentication is successful, then it is going to talk to JWT utils component. Then it is going to get the token from JWT utils component. It is going to get the token from JWT utils component and it will send that token to the client. First of all, observe how the token is getting generated. So JWT utils, here we are having the logic to create token, and validate token. JWT utils will contain the functionality create and validate token. Create and validate a token. That logic will be available as part of JWT utils class. As part of JWT utils class. Let's understand this flow first. Client is sending a request with the username and password. That request will go to authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager to verify the given user data is correct or not. So who will maintain the user data? User data will be maintained by user details service. User details service can communicate with the database to get the user data, will give to authentication manager. Authentication manager will verify that credentials are valid or not. If credentials are valid, then authenticate method will talk to JWT utils, which is going to create the token. Once the token is created, that token will be sent to the client. Once the token is sent to the client, then client is going to send another request along with the token. Client is going to send another request along with the token. So whenever client send a request along with the token, we need to verify the client token is a valid token or not. So in order to verify the client token is a valid token or not, here I'm going to add one request filter. I'm going to add one request filter. So what is the purpose of this request filter? So whenever a request comes to this hello endpoint, it will go to request filter first. Then that request filter again will talk to JWT utils component because it contains the logic to validate the token. If the token is valid, then that request will be processed and it is going to send response to the client. Otherwise, response will not be sent to the client. So in order to manage all these things for our REST API, which endpoint should be accessed, which endpoint should be secured, which endpoint should not be secured. For that, we need to configure security config. We need to write the security configuration in our REST API. That security config will decide for which method security is required, for which method security is not required. So development is a little complex thing, guys. Implementing JWT token is not that much easy. So several classes that we need to create, then only we can implement JWT token based security in our application. Are you guys able to understand the flow? Are you guys able to understand the flow? Guys, are you able to understand the flow? Come on. Please repeat once again. Huh? Yeah. Sure, guys. Observe carefully. In our application, we are having two methods. One is authenticate method. Another one is hello method. In our application, we have two methods. One is authenticate method. Second one is hello method. So what is the purpose of this authenticate method and hello method? Authenticate method is used to validate the client request. If a client is valid, then authenticate method will give token to the client. Once the client has received the token, client will send the request along with the token. If a token is valid, then that request will be processed. Otherwise, request will not be processed. So here, if you observe, first of all, to verify client is valid client or not, we will maintain some credentials. Those credentials we are going to maintain by using user details service. Those credentials will maintain by using user details service. Who will verify client given request is valid, client given credentials are valid or not? To verify client given credentials are valid or not for getting the token. So there is a authenticate endpoint. Whenever a request comes to authenticate endpoint, it will talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager will verify client given credentials are valid or not by communicating with user details service. If a client given credentials are valid, then this method will talk to one class called JWT utils class. That class contains some methods to create the token and validate the token. So that JWT utils class will give the token. Authenticate method will send the token to the client. Once it is sent, client will send a request along with the token to the hello method. So for every request, token is mandatory. So when client send that request with the token, so to validate that a token is valid or not, we are going to create one filter. That filter will be executed for every request. What that filter will do? That filter will take the token given by the client and it will communicate with the JWT utils to verify the token is valid or not. If the token is valid, then request will be processed. Otherwise, request will not be processed. So hello method is a secured method. Authenticate method, anybody can access. So when a client access authenticate method, client identity will be authenticated. If a client is giving valid credentials, token will be generated. Token will be sent to the client. When a client sends a second request with the token, if the token is valid, request will be processed. Otherwise, request will not be processed. Are you guys able to understand the flow? Are you guys able to understand the flow? Are you guys able to understand the flow? Client will send two requests. First request will be for getting the token. Second request for the actual method. Here, security config. Security config will contain the information. Hello method should be secured. Authenticate method should not be secured. That information, that customization of Spring Security will be available in the security config class. Yeah. Any doubts, anyone? In this execution flow, anybody having any doubt? Naresh Reddy, once you got the token, you no need to send the credentials again. Only you will send the token for the hello method. If token is valid, your request will be processed. Credentials you will send only for the first method to get the token. Once you got the token, you no need to send the credentials.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, auth manager is a class, right?
Authentication manager, yes.
Okay, in Java.
It's a predefined class in the Spring Security.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Sir, Auth Manager, it will check the credential only, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
It is used to check the credentials by communicating with the user detail service. User detail service, it is a predefined component in the security. Auth manager also predefined component in the security. Filter also we are going to develop. Authentication manager predefined class. User details also predefined.
Once validate the credential, then it will create the JWT token
Yes.
sent to the client.
Yes. To create the token, JWT utils class will be available.
Okay. Next time it will validate the token.
Whenever you send the request, right, there is a filter. What is the purpose of the filter? Every request will go to filter. Filter will verify the token is valid or not. Where is the logic to validate the token? In the JWT utils class, that logic is available to validate the token.
Okay.
For every request, token is required, guys, because it is a stateless application. So when you send a request for first time for the hello with the token, you will get the response. When you want to send the second request, again, you need to send the token. For every request, token is required because it is a stateless application. Every request will be considered as a first request. Every request will be considered as a first request.
Sir, in case of stateful, first time only they check the second time.
If it is a stateful application, session will be available. Na?
Okay, so they manage.
They will store the user data in the session. If user is authenticated first time, user data will be stored in the session. When the next request comes, if user data present in the session, it will process. But here in the REST API, we don't use the sessions. We will make everything as stateless. That means every request will be considered as a first request. For every request, client has to send the token.
Sir, once we generate the token, the same token can be used for other methods also?
Yes.
Okay.
Token is not for the method level. Token is at the API level.
Okay.
Sir, any time limit is there for token?
Yes, we can set that. Whenever you're creating the token expiration time, we will set that.
Okay.
Sir, every client will create the only one JWT token, or
Yeah, one token will be created for one client.
okay.
So client will send a request for the first method with username and password. We will give the username and password for the client. If that username and password is valid, then token will be generated, token will be sent to the client. Okay, who is responsible now? Guys, I will ask some questions now. I want you people to respond. Who is responsible to verify client credentials in this diagram?
Auth manager.
Auth manager. So from where Auth manager will get the actual credentials to compare with the client given credentials?
User detail service.
User detail service. User detail service will maintain the user data. What is the username and password? What is the correct username and password will be maintained by user detail service. Right. Client will send a request for authenticate method with the username and password. Authenticate method is a secured method or it is not secured method?
It is not secured.
Not secure method.
Authenticate is not secured method. Anybody can send the request for the authenticate method. Client will send username and password to the authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager is responsible to verify client given credentials are valid or not to generate the token. So authentication manager will communicate with the user detail service to get the user data. If user data matching with the client given data, then authentication manager will tell that authentication successful. If authentication is successful, then what will happen? That method will talk to JWT utility. What is the purpose of JWT utility here?
Create the JWT token.
It will contain some methods. It will contain some methods to create the token. How many parts will be there in the token?
Three
parts. Header part will be available. Payload part will be available. Signature part will be available. What will be there in the header? What will be there in the JWT token header? Token type and token algorithm. Token type and token algorithm.
256 or any.
Right. What is the token payload? What will be there in the payload?
User details.
Claims will be available.
Claims.
So who provided this token? To whom we provided this token? What is the expiration time of the token? Registered claims, public claims, private claims. So whatever the data that you want to set in the token, like username, expiry date, expiry time. Okay. Who, for which client we given this? Who is our client? Who is our provider? All that information will be available in the token payload. What is a token signature?
It validates.
Encoded header plus encoded payload plus a secret will be available. Some secret will be set for the token. Okay. So JWT details contains the method to create the token. Will give the token to authenticate method. Authenticate method will send the token to the client. Then client will send another request to the hello method along with the token. Okay. Client is going to send another request along with the token. So when the client send the request along with the token, who will verify that token?
Yeah, request filter.
Request filter is available. So when that request filter is going to execute,
It is going
that
to check
request
the
filter execute
tokens
for every request.
Yes.
So right. So when for which request this filter should execute, for which request this filter should not execute, we will
Only
configure
for
that in the security
security
config.
config.
So in the security config, we will specify that this filter should be executed for which method, this filter should not execute for which method. I will tell that for hello method, security filter should be executed. For authenticate method, filter should not execute. That information will configure in the security config. So whenever you send a request for the hello with the token, request filter will execute. What that filter will do?
It validates the token expiry date and token
This
details.
filter will read the token from the authorization header and will give it to the JWT utils to verify. So JWT utils will tell the token is valid or token or not. So if it is valid token, then filter will forward the request to the actual method. If the token is invalid, filter will send the error response. So this is response to the client. You got some better clarity than yesterday?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good.
sir.
Anyone else having any other questions now?
Right, sir. Sir, even Salesforce and Microsoft also is giving the authorization tokens. Will it use the same JWT or their own token generations?
Could you please come again?
Yeah, Salesforce, even the cloud platforms.
Huh.
Salesforce and the Microsoft already, Amazon, whatever it is, the cloud platforms, they'll generate the tokens also, their own
Correct.
tokens.
Correct.
So will they follow their own methodology or will they follow any JWT token type methodology?
Some people will follow JWT, some people will go with their own methodology.
Okay.
It depends on the situation, sir.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Come on,
Sir,
guys.
if same client is accessing from two different devices, how it's getting validated?
Sorry, can you come again?
No, if the same client accessing the app from two different devices. For example,
Same.
if I same client,
Okay.
same customer is trying to access the application from two different devices.
No, that is different story. The user accessing the same application from two different devices, that is a web application. So in that web application, session concept will be available. When user logged in successfully, so that session data will be created. When user trying to access from the different browser, that will become a different session. He has to log in, otherwise he cannot access. Now, you are using Facebook. You will log into the Facebook from laptop 1. Then if you want to use the same account in another laptop, again you have to log in. That means for you sessions will be created. One session will be created in one browser, in one laptop. Second session will be created in the second laptop browser. 2 sessions will be created for you.
Okay, but there we are getting a message, right? Like already you logged in and
that extra check they will implement. That extra check they will implement.
Which
that
part we need to implement here? Like
in the login functionality only. Once your login is successful, they will maintain some counter. How many logins happened with your account? So when the login happened for first time, in the database they will maintain login counter 1. When you log in second time, they will check login counter already available or not. If it is already available, they will tell that you already logged in. Suppose in some projects, they will implement that. If you log in into your account from one system, you cannot log in from the another system. For example, if you go for Hotstar, 3 logins only they are permitted. But if you go for Netflix, only 1 login they will permit or 2 logins they will permit. So that in the database, they will maintain your login success. I mean, whenever your login is success, they will maintain a flag. User currently logged in. Whenever you log out, they will make that column value as logged out. So like that, they can maintain that. So that's custom implementation.
For multiple logins, will they use only one token or multiple tokens?
Can you come again?
For multiple logins for the same user, will they generate multiple?
That also depends, sir. That also depends. If you want to generate single token, you can generate a single token and you can send that. So once user logged in, you will have that username and password. We will maintain that in the database and we will create a token. Token also will keep in the database. When the request comes from the same client with the same username and password, whatever the token already created, we can send that, or you can generate the new token. That depends on the requirement.
So if the same token is used also, there is no problem for the security.
No problem. But if the token, if you have that validation for the token for 30 seconds, that token will be valid only for 30 seconds. So if a client send the request after 1 minute, there is no use because token already expired. That will not handle our request.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So if I want to implement SSO, single users, using
SSO
token.
authentication. Yeah.
Sir. Using token, possible, sir?
Yes, it is possible, but when you are going for single sign-on, you need to maintain your user details in the LDAP server. Because generally, when you go for SSO is when you want to use same credentials to access multiple applications. Example, in the company. So in the company, when you go for VPN, credentials will be available. For your payroll login will be available, and your system login will be available, and Jira login will be available, Jenkins login will be available, and your Outlook login will be available. For all that, your employee ID and password will be available. Those details will be configured in the LDAP server. So that is single sign-on.
Okay, it act like a gateway after passing that.
So why we should have LDAP server there, sir?
LDAP server basically will maintain the employee details within the company, sir. Company specific server they will maintain. All the employees, they should be able to access multiple applications within the company with the same credential. They don't need to log in every time. If they log in into one application, they can access the remaining applications. That is single sign-on basically. In every company, LDAP server will be available to maintain employee details.
Which is similar to Active Directory, sir?
But
Yes, sir,
is
Active
JW token, is it mandatory, sir, for SSO?
No.
Okay.
JW tokens came into market recently. LDAP is available from long back. It's not mandatory.
Sir, if I want to learn more about session management, all these things, which resource I need to follow, sir?
That not one resource, multiple resources will be available in the Google and YouTube. You can refer.
Okay.
I mean, session management, learning session management means based on requirement in the project we are going to implement. Session management will not be same in all the projects.
Yes, sir.
Right?
For REST API, there is no need to manage sessions, no, sir?
Yes. For REST API, if you are using session, that is violating the rules of the REST API. You should not.
REST principle.
Yeah, one of the REST principle, stateless application. Your application should be stateless. Okay, good guys. Let's try to create this project now. Okay, file, new, Spring Starter project. So I'm going to create one Spring Boot application with the JWT, Spring Security, JWT. Yeah. Okay, next. Next, finish. So currently I have not selected any dependency, guys. So I'm going to add some dependencies. I prepared a notes in order to develop our application with a Spring Boot security by using JWT. Okay, create boot application with below dependencies. So I have uploaded everything in the notes. I will share these notes. So I'm creating one Spring Boot application, Spring Security JWT app. In this application only my start class is available, nothing else. Now, if you go to pom.xml, in the pom.xml also, I did not take any dependency as of now. So let me give dependencies in the pom.xml. So these are my dependencies. Let me take these dependencies. Let me keep it in my pom.xml. Okay, guys, good. So once we have added these dependencies in the pom.xml, then we need to create our request binding classes and response binding classes. We need to create request binding classes and response binding classes. So what is that request binding class and response binding class we are going to create? So request binding class, it means client is going to send username and password. Client is going to send username and password in the request. Okay. And we need to send token in the response. So in order to take the credentials And in order to give the token, I'm going to create binding classes. I'm going to create binding classes. What are those binding classes? Create request and response binding classes. So one is authentication request, which contains username and password. And another one is authentication response, which contains just one variable called JWT. Good. Now let me create my binding classes here. Those we are calling as modals, authentication request and authentication response. So class dot modals. In this, I'm taking the class name as authentication request. In the authentication request class, I'm taking two variables, private string username and private string password. So what is the purpose of this authentication request class? It is used to capture the username and password given by the client for token purpose. Okay. So username and password, let me take setters and getters. If you use Lombok, it is not required. Let me write one 0-param constructor and one parameterized constructor. So this is just a binding class to take the data which is given by the client. Authentication request. Fine. In this, I'm having two variables. One is username variable, another one is password variable. Then I'm going to create one more class that is called authentication response. So this class is responsible to send JWT token to the client. So in this class, I'm taking simple one variable and I'm writing one constructor to inject that variable. I'm writing one get method. That's it. So private final string JWT. So authentication response is the class. In that class, I'm taking a parameterized constructor. For that constructor, I'm passing token as a value. Token will be injected to this variable. And I have a getter method to get the token. Okay. So this is authentication request class. And this is my authentication response class. Guys, what is the purpose of authentication request class and authentication response class? What is the purpose of authentication request and authentication response? Can you guys tell me? Can you guys tell me what is the purpose of authentication request and authentication response? Authentication request is used to take the data given by the client, username and password. Authentication response to send the token in the response. Okay. So once this binding classes creation got completed, then third step, create user detail service for the credential configuration. As I told you, here user details will be available, which is used to configure user data. So now, in order to create that user detail service, Spring provided one interface. We are going to implement that interface and we'll configure user data. So let me go here and let me create my user detail service class, which will maintain user data. Got it? Fine, perfect. So let me go and create that user details service class. New class. I'm going to configure that in the security package. My user details service. My user details service. Okay. So in my user details service class, we are going to implement Spring provided interface. So what is that interface? That is user details service. User details service. Okay. This one I'm going to call as Spring Bean by writing @service annotation. Okay. So in this class, I need to specify what is the correct user credential. So I'm going to configure the user details, public user details, load user by username. Load user by username. I'm going to specify some value. Then what it is going to return? It is going to return new user with the username, comma, password, comma, roles of that user. So this user class is not our class, guys. It is provided by Spring Security. Now let me throw the exception. Throws user not found exception. So whenever you are overriding, whenever you are writing this method to load the user based on that, let me override this method. Let me override this method. So this method should throw one exception. Now this is new array list. That is the list of roles that we are going to specify. I'm not giving any roles. I'm giving empty. I'm giving empty. That's it. So here I will specify username as admin and a password. Password we are going to generate from bcrypt generator. Bcrypt generator is available. I don't want to hard code the password. I have given the link where we can encode and decode the passwords. Bcrypt generator is available. Yes. Go to this bcryptgenerator.com. In this, I'm encrypting the password with a name called admin. Yes, this is the password I want to configure. Username is admin and password is this. So like this, I'm configuring my user detail service. So here you can load the user data from the database also based on the username. Here I'm not using any database. I'm writing my user detail service, which is implementing Spring user details service. Okay, Spring user detail service. In this method, I'm writing one, in this class, I'm writing one method, load user by username string yes. Okay, now this will represent username, but I'm not taking anything from the database. So I'm hard coding my username and this is my password, which is encoded by using bcrypt algorithm. So once this user detail service is created, then what is the next step? User detail service is available. Then what is the next step that we need to follow to implement our JWT? User detail service is created now. JWT utils class we need. Okay, guys. So JWT utils class, already I have it. So lengthy code will be available in that, guys. So let me take it from existing project. JWT utils class will be available. That JWT utils class will contain several methods. It will contain several methods. Those methods are responsible. Those methods are responsible to generate the token and validate the token. So I'm taking that JWT utils class. In the JWT util class, secret key, whatever you want, you can give. This is used to extract the username from the token, extract expiration from the token, extract claims from the token, extract all claims. It is used to check whether token is expired or not. It is used to generate the token. Generate token is using user details. Based on the username, it is going to create the token. This method is used to validate the token. So this code I have taken from internet. This is JWT util class. This class contains the methods which are required to generate the token and validate the token. So with this, our JWT utils class is ready. I have given that code in the notes as well, which is used to create the token and validate the token. So once that token creation logic is ready, then I'm going to create my filter class. Guys, writing this filter is very important. Lot of logic we need to do in this filter only. Okay, let me create that filter class. What is the responsibility of the filter, guys? Can you tell me? What is the responsibility of the filter? Filter is responsible to take the token given by the client and verify that a token is valid or not. So that logic we are going to write inside that filter. Good. So filter is responsible to take the token coming from the request. Filter is responsible to take the token coming from the request and validate the token. Is it valid or not? If the token is valid, then only we are going to process. Otherwise, we don't process. How to create that filter? So let me go here and create a class with a name called JWT request filter. You can give any name for that. So I'm giving a name JWT request filter. JWT request filter. Perfect. So this is a normal Java class now. I want to make this class as a Spring Bean. To make this class as a Spring Bean, I will go for @component. Now this filter, when it should execute once for each request. So extends properties from once for request filter. So it is a predefined class available in the Spring. This class will make sure that this filter is executing once for each request, once for request filter. In this filter, there is a method called doFilterInternal. We need to override that method. doFilterInternal, there is a method. So in this filter method, we have the request object, we have the response object, and we have the filter chain. Request object is available, response object is available, and filter chain is also available. Now here, what is the logic we need to write? So what is the logic we need to write? Let me write the steps first. Get authorization token, authorization header. Get authorization header from request. Because client will send a request with a token. So how client will send a token? As a authorization bearer token. So first get the authorization header from the request. Once we got that authorization header from the request, now what I need to do is I need to verify, I need to extract username from the token. Extract username from the token. In the token, username will be available. Extract username from the token. Then load user data based on the username. Load user data based on username using user details. Already we created user details service. So now I got the token from the client in the header. I got the token from the client in the header. So first I need to get the header. Once I get the header, I will get the token. Once I get the token, then I'm going to extract the username from the token. Once I got the username, I will load user data based on the username, load user data based on username using user details service. Once I got this user data, then verify or validate token data, validate a token with user details. Really, this token belongs to this user or not, we are going to verify this. So these are the 4 steps that we need to implement in our filter. So what is the first step? Get the authorization header from the request. How to get the authorization header from the request? So very simple, request dot get header. Header name will be available as authorization. Header name will be available as authorization. Let me store that into a variable. Okay, so this is auth header, authorization header that I am going to get. Now, from this header, I need to get my username. That means extract the username from the token. So let me take string username is equal to some null value and string JWT is equal to some null value. Okay, I got the token from the authorization header. From the token, I need to extract my username. So how I am going to extract that? Suppose if that token is not equal to null, if client is not sending the token, then I can't do anything. If token is available, then only I need to get that. So how I am going to verify? If auth header is not equal to null, if auth header is not equal to null, and if auth header value starts with a bearer, because it is a bearer token, starts with the bearer, then only I can extract username from the token. So auth header dot substring of 7. So why I am giving auth header dot substring of 7? So these are 6 characters and 1 space will be available. So client is going to send a token like this, guys. Authorization is equal to bearer. Authorization is equal to bearer space token will be available. So when the client is sending a request along with the token, that will come with the header key as a authorization, header value, bearer space token. So whenever I call request.get a header of authorization, I will get bearer space token. So bearer is having 6 characters, space is the 7th character. So now I am giving that header value. I can say auth header, authorization header value. So it will give more meaningful name. If authorization header value not equal to null, and if the header value starts with the bearer, then from the 7th character, I want to get the data, substring of 7. When I do the substring of 7, it is going to give me actual JWT token. It will give me actual JWT token. So if you go to Postman, then you will get more clarity on that. Let me go for my Postman. Now, so go to the request. When we are sending a request with the token, how it is going to look like. Yeah. So this is a get request, auth, bearer token that we are sending. Bearer token we are sending. This is the token value that we are providing. Then what will happen? That token will go to the server as key as authorization value bearer space token will be available. Now, when this request is going to server, my filter is going to execute. In the filter, I'm getting the header value by using key. What is the key name? Authorization. This is the key. With this key, when I get the header, I will get the auth header value. What will be there in the auth header value? Bearer space token will be available. If auth header value not equal to null, and if it is starting with the bearer space, then I want to remove this bearer. I want only token. Token starts from the 7th. So now bearer 6 characters plus 7 is the space. Substring of 7 means it will start from 8th character. It will give till end of the string. That means my token will come. Token will be stored into JWT variable. So once this token we got, in the JWT utils class, we have a method to extract the username from the token. So here if you go to JWT util class, in the JWT util class, extract username method is available by giving the token. Okay, so let me inject JWT utils in this class. Private JWT util, which we have in our project, JWT utils. Let me go for auto wiring. In the JWT util, there is a method to extract username based on the token. So username is equal to JWT util dot extract username by passing my token. Token is available in a variable called JWT. That's it. This is the token. I'm extracting the username from the token. Username is equal to null and JWT is equal to null. So now from this substring, I'm getting the token. From the token, I'm getting my username. Now I need to load user data based on the username from user details service. Okay. So when I will do that operation, if username not equal to null, in the token, if username is available, if username not equal to null, and if get authentication is null, I don't want to do any security check for this. Security context holder from the Spring framework dot get authentication if it is equal to null. If it is equals to null. So if username not equal to null and security context authentication is null, that means when the security is not happening for this, when the security is not available for this, I want to load the user data by using that username. So to load the user data by using username, user details service is required. Let me inject my user details service which I have created. My user details service, that is user details service object I'm injecting. Now in this, we have a method to load the user based on the username. So user details service dot load user by using username. So whatever the username is available, we'll pass that username. Based on that, it is going to load the user data. So once we got this user details, then in the JWT util, there is a method to verify. There is a method to verify that a token is valid for the given user or not. How we are going to do that? If JWT util dot validate token, pass the token and pass the user details. So token nothing but our JWT. Okay. So in the JWT util class, there is a method called validate token method is available. For the validate token method, what it is taking? It is taking token as an input and it is taking user details as input. So I'm calling here if token is valid, then what I will do? I am going to set that this is passed. This is a valid token. If it is a valid token, I will set that security context, it is already passed. You can allow him to access the request. How we are going to specify that? So we are going to specify that by using security context holder. So how to set that data to the security context holder? To set the data to the security context holder, we need username password authentication token. So there is a predefined class called username password authentication token is available. Uname password authentication token. So is equal to new username password authentication token. So for this, what we are going to pass? So for this, we are going to specify. So what are our user details? User details object is already available, and credentials. What are the credentials that we need to set? I'm not going to set any credentials. And what are the authorities? So user details dot get authorities will be available. I'm going to set that for this username password authentication token. So now for this username password authentication token, I need to set the details of that user. Okay, set the details. So here I'm going to specify new web authentication details. New web authentication details source will be available. New web authentication details source dot build the details by using this request. Whatever the request we are getting, we are setting that request to this authentication details source. Once it is done, finally we are going to specify security context holder dot get context dot set authentication. Okay, what is that authentication? Username password authentication token is available. We are going to set to that. If a token is valid, then we are setting that user data for the security context to process the request. If token is not valid, nothing will happen. Okay, so we are loading the user data by using username and user details. Then we are going to validate the token. So if the token is valid, then that request will be processed. After that, I'm going to write chain.do filter. So whatever the request filter is available, let me proceed with that filter. Filter chain is available. Filter chain dot do filter, pass the request object and response object. So this is our filter, which is responsible to execute for every request, and it is responsible to take the token from the header and extract the username and load the user data, give the token and user data to the validate token method. If the token is valid, then set the token in the security context to process the request. So this is my filter creation. So what is the responsibility of this filter? This filter is communicating with the JWT util to verify this token is valid or not. Okay, once this filter creation is completed, then the next step is we need to create security config class. What is the purpose of security config class? Security config class will tell for which method that filter should be executed, for which method that filter should not execute. So let me go and create one security config class. Web security config class I'm going to create. New class, web security config. My web security config. This is my class. I'm customizing Spring Security by using this web security config class. Right. What is the purpose of this web security config class, guys? What is the purpose of this web security config class? Any idea? It is used to decide for which method that filter should execute, for which method that filter should not execute. As it is used for security purpose, let me go for one annotation called enable web security annotation. Okay, go to this security class, window, perspective, reset perspective. Yes, go to this security config, my web security config. It is a normal Java class. Let me enable security here. Let me go for enable web security, enable web security. In this class, I'm extending the properties from web security configurer adapter. Web security configurer adapter class, I'm extending the properties. Okay. So in this, there are several methods that we are going to override. Okay, guys. First of all, I need to specify authentication manager, auth manager. Auth manager should be connected with the user details service. So let me write my authentication manager. Okay, public void configure global. My authentication manager details. So how I am going to specify authentication manager builder on. So for this authentication manager, I need to set the user details service. So what is our user details service? Let me inject my user details service. Authentication manager should communicate with my user details service. Okay. User details service will be available. Let me do auto wiring and let me set this user details service to authentication manager. Okay. So let me go for this as auto void. That means wherever authentication manager is used in our project will be used from here, which is having our user details service, which is using our user details service. Now, if you see in the diagram, authentication manager is connected with the user details service, which is used to verify user data is correct or not. So to verify that user data, user password is encoded by using bcrypt. So let me configure password encoder. Let me configure password encoder that we are using as bcrypt. So now let me return new bcrypt password encoder. Okay, let me configure this as bean. So in our application, wherever the password encoder is required, that should be used with bcrypt password encoder, because in user detail service, I configure the password as bcrypt encoded password. Perfect. So once it is done, now let me overwrite my authentication manager bean. I have configured my own authentication manager. So let me configure that authentication manager bean. Authentication manager bean is available. Let me override that. So now super authentication manager bean, let me configure this as my authentication manager bean. So once it is done, finally I need to configure my security rule for which method we need to allow, which method we should not allow. Let me override configure method with HTTP security. I'm calling configure method with HTTP security. So what I need to do in this HTTP security? So now here I'm going to specify HTTP dot authorize request. So authorize request. Which request we are going to authorize? If any request matched with this one /authenticate, then permit all, allow them. Okay. So now if any other request comes, then that should be authenticated. And if you have any exception, let us do exception handling. And let us do if any session is required, session management. What is the session management? Session creation policy. What is our session creation policy? Stateless. Session creation policy is the stateless policy. So what I am telling here, any request which comes, then authorize that request, but allow this request. So ant matches authenticate, permit all, process this request. Right. Any other request that should be authenticated. What is the session management policy? Stateless policy. So now for this security, I need to specify the filter. So I have a filter, that filter should be executed. HTTP dot add filter before processing the request, that filter should be executed. So we have created a filter. Let me inject that filter in this config class. What is my filter? Private JWT request filter is available. JWT request filter is available. Let me inject that filter by using auto wiring. Now for the security config, I'm going to tell this is my filter This filter should execute with a username and password authentication filter. Username password authentication filter dot class. Okay, so this is our configure security method, which we are using to configure HTTP security that is required for our application. So in this security config, I'm telling that any request comes with authenticate, permit that. If any other request comes, then that should be processed by filter. So what is there in that filter? In the filter, I have a logic to take the token. The token will be validated. Got it? Any request which comes with authenticate, allow. Right? If any other request comes, authenticate. How it should authenticate? By using filter. In the filter, I have a logic. Got it? So once this security config class is completed, finally we need to create our REST controller. What should be there in the REST controller? One method to generate the token, another method for actual processing logic. So create our REST controller class. In that REST controller, authenticate method will be available and a hello method will be available. Authenticate method is used to give the token if the credentials are valid. Okay, let me create my REST controller class. New class, creating a REST controller. My REST controller. I'm keeping that in the package in dot ashokid dot REST package. Okay, so to represent this as a REST controller, I'm using @REST controller annotation. Now, I'm writing one simple method, public string say hello. Public string say hello. This is a normal method. It is going to return one message, hello world. That's it. Let me map it to get request method, get mapping. I'm giving the URL as a /hello. So this is my method, which is a secured method. If you want to access this method, you need a token. So who will generate the token for you? You need to send a request with your credentials for the token. So for that, I'm having one more method, public response entity, public response entity. Then I'm writing one method called authentication method. Okay, for this authentication, I'm expecting authentication request. I created a binding class with the username and password. So whatever the request you send, that will be taken care by authentication request. So this authentication request data, you will send in the body. So to read the data from the body, I'm using request body annotation. This method, I am mapping to post method. @post mapping /authenticate. /authenticate. So you need to send the username and password in the post request for this method. The data will be stored into authentication request class. Now I want to validate that username and password is correct or not. Who is responsible to validate that username password correct or not? For that, I'm going to use authentication manager. So here already I have configured my authentication manager, right? I'm going to inject that. So let me inject my authentication manager. Private authentication manager. Authentication manager is available. So I'm going to do auto wiring for my authentication manager. As you see in the diagram, request will come to authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager is responsible to verify that user data. Let me take try catch. Let me take try catch. Okay. Authentication manager dot authenticate. Auth manager dot authenticate by passing authentication data. So what is that authentication data? Username and authentication token we need to pass, right? New username, password, authentication token. So it is expecting username and password. Okay. Where is that username and password? Request dot get username, comma, request dot get password. Request dot get username, and request dot get a password. So with this, I'm calling this method authentication manager dot authenticate by passing my username and password. Okay. So if it is authenticated successfully, no problem. If it is failed to authenticate, it will throw the exception. I'm going to throw new exception saying that invalid credentials. I'll throw the exception saying that invalid credential. If authentication is successful, then no issue. If authentication is successful, then no issue. If authentication is not successful, then I'm going to throw the exception. I'm going to throw that exception. Okay, this is where authentication is happening for the given credential. You will send the request with username and password to authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager. Authentication manager will talk to user details service to verify that username and password. So if that authentication is a success, then I need to generate the token. So to generate the token, I need user details class. User details data required. So let me inject my user details. Private, my user details service, user details. Let me go for auto wiring. User details available. User details dot load user by username. Request dot get username will be available. It will give me user details. It will give me user details. Once we have user details, then we can generate a token. User details dot load user by username. User details. My user details. My user details service will be available. My user details service load user by username. Load user by username. That's it. What it is returning? User details. My user details service. User details service dot load user by username. My user details service I need. Private, my user details service. I will go for service. Let me go for auto wide. I need to load the user data by using that username. Service dot load user by username. Let me pass request dot get username. Okay, fine. So what this method is going to return? This method is going to return user details. Okay. So once I got the user details, I need to generate a token. So how to generate the token? By using JWT util class. So let me inject my JWT util class here. Private JWT util class I have created. I'm injecting that by using auto wiring. Now, using this JWT util, I will generate a token. JWT util dot generate token by passing user details. So what it will return? It will return me a token. That is my JW. So what I will do with this, I'm going to create authentication response. Authentication response. Response is equal to new authentication response with the JWT. Now I'm going to return that. Return new response entity with body and status. So what is the body? The body is our response. And what is the status? HTTP status dot OK. HTTP status dot OK. That's it. So this is my method, which will take user credentials and it will verify the user credentials. If user credentials are valid, then it will generate a token with the user data and it will send the token to the user. Then this method is available This is a normal method which is secured. Here, I have a configuration for the security. Authenticate method you can access directly. The remaining methods will be handled by using filter. In my filter, I have implemented a logic to take the token. If token is validated, then only request will be processed. Otherwise, request will not be processed. So with this, we completed all the steps of our application. Now, if you observe diagram once again, now you will get more clarity. User detail service will maintain the user data. Authentication manager is used to authenticate the users. JWT util contains the methods to create and validate the token. Request filter is available to verify the token. Security config is available to decide which method should be accessed directly, for which methods filter should be executed. Done. Let's run this application and check it. Refresh, right click, close unrelated projects, right click, run as boot application. Username, password I have given as admin and admin. Right, guys, our application got started. Application started. Then let us clear our console. Then go to Postman, localhost colon 8080. Let me send you a request with authenticate. That should be a post request. Body, username is admin, password is also admin. I don't need to send any token because it is first method to authenticate the user with username and password. Click on send. Now, forbidden access is coming for this authenticate method. Authenticate. Is it URL pattern correct, guys? My REST controller. In my REST controller, authenticate is available. It is a post request. Authenticate. Username is admin. Password is also admin. Headers. Check for the header. Cookies are available. Let me delete the cookie. Yeah. Now click on send. Still I'm getting the response as 403 forbidden. Let me run in the debug mode and see why it is coming like this. Web security config and matches authenticate.permit all. My REST controller. First of all, request is coming to REST controller or not, or is it going to filter? Let's debug. Clear the console, refresh, right click, debug as boot application. Cleared. Go here, click on send. 403 forbidden. Directly it is going to forbidden. That means the request is not even going to filter. Web security config, HTTP authorize requests. Guys, request is not going to the filter. Directly it is saying that forbidden, you can't access that. So let me check what is the issue. Web security config class. HTTP security CRF RF disable, authorize requests, everything is fine. HTTP dot CSRF dot disable dot authorize the request. But that should not make the problem. Here I have enable web security. Let me make it as configuration class. I'm making this class as a configuration class to load that. Let me stop and debug. Yeah, clear the console. Go here and send the request again. Delete the cookie. Click on send. Now the request is coming to the filter. Now the request is coming to the filter, right? F8. Earlier we did not get that request to the filter. Now the request came to authenticate method. Now verify. User details are verified. If user details are verified, token should be generated. Still the request is in progress. It is processing. Okay, F8. Now see, I got the token. So the mistake that is in this security, I did not enable configuration. So this class is not represented as a Spring Bean. Configuration is not loaded. Now I got the token. So now let us take this token. Now let us take this token and let me go to get request method /hello. If I send a request to the hello method without a token, I'm not passing any token, send a request. Then I'm getting 403 forbidden. I'm not able to access that method. Why? Because whenever a request comes to the application, that will go to my security configuration. Only authenticate method will be allowed. Remaining all methods should be handled by using filter. So in this filter, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to read the token. So let me keep a breakpoint in this and let me keep a breakpoint in this and let me send the request. Now the request came to my filter. In the filter, I'm trying to read the authorization header value. Anything available? Authorization header value coming as null. That means you are not sending the token. So if the authorization header value is null, then what is happening? The filter is sending error response. Okay, your request is not processed. So you are going to get error response. Forbidden. You cannot access. Your access is denied. Go to this bearer token. Let me pass my token. Then click on send. Now I'm sending the request along with the token. Now you see in the filter, request came to a filter. Now I got the bearer token. So bearer space token is available. Now I'm reading that token. That is my JWT token. So from that JWT token, I'm extracting the username. Username is admin. With that username, I'm loading user details and I'm validating my token. My token is valid. I'm setting the security authentication, chain.do filter. Then that request will be processed. I got the response as a hello world. So with this, we are able to implement JWT token and we are able to get the token with the first method and we are sending the request with the token for the second method. The token is validated and I got the response. So this is the logic of JWT implementation. Guys, it is little challenging. I do agree. So writing this code in the first time is very difficult. I've given step by step what you need to do to implement this JWT token. So if you follow these notes, you will be able to create a Spring Boot application with the JWT token. Okay. Now, so are we going to do this logic every day in the project or it is one-time setup? Are we going to do this every day or it is one-time setup? It is one-time setup. Okay, good guys. Yeah, fine. Anybody having any questions on this? I will share the GitHub repository also as well for this project because it is little, coding is little difficult to implement the JWT because it's not about only one class, several classes we need to create with multiple methods. Fine. I will share this GitHub repository and I will share the notes as well.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in JWT util class, they have the already configured class. After that, you can download from the net, and which type of configuration is required in the JWT util class?
In the JWT class, I have not done any configuration. Just I have taken here. You can change whatever the secret that you want. I'm keeping secret as just secret. If you want, you can keep your company name as a secret, or you can keep some value, something like this. Whatever the secret you want to keep in the JWT token signature, you can add that. That is the only change. Remaining everything as it is.
Okay, sir.
Sir, what is
No
CS?
any class, no any.
Sorry?
No any class, no any another configuration is not required.
Nothing is required.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
When we are sending first time request, why we are getting exceptions?
I told you that now in my security class, I did not write this annotation. So my security context is not loaded. That's why it is not able to process my request.
Okay.
After adding this configuration, it is able to recognize my security configuration. It should allow to access this method without any token. So first time I forgot to add this annotation, so it was not loaded.
Okay, sir. Second question is what is CSR, sir?
So CSRF that I will discuss later, sir. CSRF and CORS issues will be available. So those are security related issues. We will discuss that. That is not important here. Even if you remove that, also no issue. Right?
Yeah, sir, can we practice tomorrow this client also for this one?
Yeah, client means already from the Postman. So that means if you want to develop a client, only thing that you need to do, REST template dot add header. In the header, you need to set authorizations is the key, bearer space value as the value. That's it.
Okay, using REST template. Now web client also REST client.
In the web, we already discussed how to send the headers in the request, right? Same.
Right,
process.
right. Okay, sir. Right.
Sir, in Eureka server, sir, they have required for the token. In case of
Eureka server, no. Why Eureka server requires token?
Not Eureka server, register API, sir.
Sorry.
In Eureka server, so many APIs register.
For that token is not required, sir. Eureka is our service registry. For that token is not required.
Ashok, there is humble request.
Yeah, please.
I feel one or two class dedicated to this because I'm not comfortable. This is not a kind of Ashok class where we get the confidence.
Sir, JWT.
Allow me to complete.
Please go ahead.
You start teaching a particular topic and confidence automatically comes. But here, that's not the situation. So if you have time, or if you can allocate one more or two classes more on this, it will be really helpful for everyone, I believe. Please, go ahead.
Dhirendra, let me explain you first.
Yeah.
So JWT in the general applications, we are writing simple coding. One method, two methods will be available. So you will get the confidence because you will understand whatever the code that we are writing, like creating a controller, creating a method, get request, post request, getting the data from database, returning the object. But JWT is something, there are multiple classes available. Even if I explain tomorrow or day after tomorrow, can you butify this code, whatever we are writing? Can you butify this code? That's not possible, right? So here you need to understand the execution flow, how that JWT is working. That's why first I have explained, yesterday I explained theoretically what is JWT, what is the structure of JWT, how it is working. Today I explained what is the execution flow of the JWT, what are the methods we have created, what are the classes which are involved. Then after I have done the coding part. Even if I do that explanation tomorrow, same process will be there. There is nothing better. So the only thing, as I told you, writing the code for JWT is difficult. That's why I have given step by step. Here the code also I have given. If you follow this document, you will be able to create the project. Then you will get the clarity. JWT, if you just listen to the class, you will not get that confidence. I have given my best, so I can't do better than this. You got my point. So that's why I explained theoretically what is the execution flow. Client will send the username and password in the request. It will go to authenticate method. Authenticate method will talk to authentication manager to verify. Authentication manager will use user details to get the user data. If authentication manager authentication is successful, then it will talk to JWT util. In that, there is a method to create the token. That token will come to the client. Then client will send the next request with the token. Whenever the next request comes, hello method, I'm not permitting the hello method in the security config. In the security config, I mentioned that if the URL is authenticate, permit every request. If the URL is not authenticate, then it should go to the filter. So what we are doing in the filter? In the filter, we are reading the header. From the header, we are reading the token. From the token, we are reading the username. Based on that, we are validating the token. So if the token is valid, then it will proceed. If the token is not valid, it will deny the request. If you can understand that execution flow, coding that you can take it from here. So you don't need to by heart that code because it's not the code that we are going to write daily. It's one-time setup. You got it? Fine. Next one. Any questions, sir?
So how to implement this in microservices?
How to implement this in microservices means, so here we will have the API gateway. So whatever the code that I have written in this project, right? This project, whatever the classes that we have created, these classes we need to keep in the API gateway. So whenever a request comes to the API gateway, they will get the token. Then they will send the next request with the token. This filtering logic and validating logic will be done in the API gateway. So you can assume that this JWT app classes will be present in the API gateway. Instead of validating that, instead of writing these filters and tokens in every microservice, we'll keep that in the API gateway. So that for all the microservices, it will execute at one place.
Okay, sir.
Good. Fine, guys. So,
sir, one small doubt. Basically, what is a high-level difference between the OAuth, the token, and the JWT token?
OAuth tokens means if you want to access one application by using the account available in the another application, then we will go for OAuth. Okay. You don't want to create the account directly in my website. So you want to access my website by using your account in the Google or GitHub. Then we will go for this OAuth. So JWT is a pure token based. If you have it is like a key. If you have the key, then you can access. That key will expire based on the time that we have given. So both are two different scenarios.
But OAuth also we can use the bearer token, right?
Right. That also we can use it. But that bearer token will be decided by whom? Who will give the token for you? Third-party application. Yeah, third-party application will give you the token. Here we are generating the token and we are using the token.
Okay.
The OAuth third-party provider will give the token for you. But here our application is creating the token and giving the token.
Okay, so we can use both OAuth and JWT together.
Yes, we can use it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, good. So please practice this example, guys. As I told you, it is difficult topic. Understanding in the single shot is difficult, as I told you that. So you need to go through this multiple times and go through the document step by step so that you will be able to set up this. Fine. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for now. We'll continue in the tomorrow session.